The stars had always been kind to humanity. For 300 years, humans had lived among the alien races of the Galactic Council. They had shared their music, their art, their dreams of a peaceful future. They had trusted the Council with everything they had. And on that terrible night, the Council repaid that trust with fire. Admiral Daniel Carter was eating dinner with his crew when the first alarms went off. He dropped his fork and ran to the bridge of his colony ship. The horizon's edge, what he saw on the screens made his heart stop. Earth was burning. The blue and green planet that had been home to humanity for millions of years was covered in orange flames and black smoke. Lieutenant Lavra Mitchell was already at her station, her hands shaking as she pulled up the reports. Her voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. The Valorian warships were bombing every major city. New York was gone. London was gone. Tokyo, Beijing, Cairo, Sydney. All gone in the first hour. Daniel could not believe what he was seeing. The Valorians were supposed to be their allies. They had signed treaties of friendship. They had exchanged ambassadors. Valorian children had studied in human schools. How could this be happening? Commander Kevin Brooks came running onto the bridge. His face was pale, and his eyes were wild with fear and anger. He had family on Earth, a wife, 2 daughters. He looked at the screens and fell to his knees. The area where his family lived was nothing but a crater now. Daniel put his hand on Kevin's shoulder, but he did not know what to say. There were no words for this kind of pain. There were no words for watching your entire world die. The communications officer, a young man named Ryan Pierce, called out that he was receiving transmissions from other human ships. Everyone was asking the same questions. What was happening? Why were the Valorians attacking? What should they do? Daniel ordered Ryan to find out which other species were involved. The answer came quickly, and it was worse than anyone had imagined. It was not just the Valorians. The Kethari fleet was attacking the human colonies near their border. The Dominion of Sirith had already destroyed 3 human mining stations. The entire council had turned against humanity at the same moment. Lavra looked up from her console with tears running down her face. She had found the reason. A leaked transmission from the council chambers showed the vote that had happened 3 days ago. The elder races had decided that humanity was growing too fast. Humans were having too many children. Human colonies were spreading too quickly. In another 100 years, humans would outnumber all other species combined. The council had decided that this could not be allowed, that the solution they had chosen was extinction. Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. It was not fear. It was not even anger. It was something deeper and darker. It was the understanding that everything he had believed about the galaxy was a lie. The council had smiled at humanity while planning their murder. They had accepted human gifts and human friendship while counting down the days until the killing would begin. Kevin got back on his feet. His tears had dried, and his face had become hard as stone. He asked Daniel what they were going to do. Were they going to fight? Were they going to run? Were they going to die like everyone else? Before Daniel could answer, Ryan announced an incoming transmission from Earth. It was flagged as Priority 1, which meant it came from the highest levels of the military. Daniel told him to put it through. The face that appeared on the screen was older and tired, but Daniel knew it well. It was his father, General Paul Carter. He was standing in what looked like an underground bunker. The walls were shaking from explosions somewhere above. Paul spoke quickly because he did not have much time. He told Daniel that the surface defenses had fallen. The orbital stations were destroyed. Earth had maybe 2 hours left before the Valorians finished their bombardment and landed. Ground troops to kill any survivors. Daniel asked his father what he should do. He had 3,000 people on his ship. Where could they go? How could they survive when the entire galaxy wanted them dead? Paul smiled then. It was a strange smile, full of secrets and sadness, and something that looked almost like hope. He told Daniel that the Council did not know everything about humanity. They did not know about the Ark. They did not know what was sleeping in the darkness between the stars. He gave Daniel a set of coordinates in the Oort cloud, the distant ring of ice and rock at the edge of the solar system. He told Daniel to go there and find what was hidden. He told Daniel to wake them up. And then he said something that Daniel did not understand. He said to make the galaxy remember why the ancients feared humans. The transmission began to break up. Paul said one last thing before the signal died completely. He said he was proud of his son. He said he loved him. And then the screen went black. Laura reported that Earth's communication network had gone offline. The planet was silent now. 8 billion people had lived there that morning. Now there was nothing but ash and fire. Daniel stood very still for a long moment. Everyone on the bridge was looking at him, waiting for orders. They were scared and angry and heartbroken. They needed someone to tell them what to do. Daniel took a deep breath and made his decision. He ordered the navigator to set a course for the coordinates his father had given him. They would travel at maximum speed, but with full stealth protocols. No one could know where they were. Going. Kevin asked what was in the Oort cloud. What could possibly be out there that would help them against the entire Galactic Council? Daniel looked at the stars on the view screen. Somewhere out there, hidden in the cold and the dark, was something his father had kept secret his entire life. Something that made him smile even as his world was dying. Daniel did not know what they would find. But he knew one thing for certain. Humanity was not going to disappear quietly into the night. The Council had made a terrible mistake. They had attacked without warning, without mercy, without giving humanity a chance to surrender. And now humanity had nothing left to lose. The horizons edge turned away from the burning earth and flew into the darkness. Behind them, the planet that had been humanity's home for so long finally fell silent. The Valorians reported to the Council that the human homeworld had been neutralized. There were celebrations across the galaxy that night, but in the cold reaches of space, 3,000 humans flew towards something ancient and forgotten. And the galaxy would soon learn that humanity was much older and much more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. The journey to the Oort cloud took 2 years. 2 long years of hiding in the empty spaces between stars where no one would think to look for them. 2 years of rationing food and recycling water and trying not to think about everyone they had lost. Daniel aged 10 years in those 2 years. His hair turned gray at the temples and lines appeared on his face that had not been there before. He spent most nights alone in his quarters, staring at old photographs of Earth and wondering if he was leading his people to salvation or just delaying their deaths. The horizons edge picked up other survivors along the way. A mining ship with 200 workers, a passenger liner that had escaped the attack on Mars, a military frigate with a crew of 50 who had been on patrol when their base was destroyed. By the time they reached the coordinates, their little fleet had grown to 12 ships, carrying almost 8,000 humans. Laura had become Daniel's most trusted officer during the journey. She had lost her entire family on Earth, but she never let her grief slow her down. She worked 18 hours a day, keeping the ship running and keeping the crew focused on survival. Kevin had changed too. The man who had fallen to his knees crying on the bridge was gone. In his place was a cold and silent soldier who spoke only when necessary and spent his free time in the training room, punching bags until his knuckles bled. When they finally arrived at the coordinates, they found nothing but ice and rock. Thousands of asteroids drifted in the eternal darkness, looking exactly like every other asteroid field in the galaxy. Daniel felt his hope begin to fade. Maybe his father had been wrong. Maybe there was nothing here at all. Then Chief Engineer Nathan Price called from the sensor station. His voice was strange, a mix of confusion and excitement. He said he was detecting something impossible. One of the larger asteroids was not an asteroid at all. It was hollow. And inside that hollow space, there was metal. A lot of metal. Daniel ordered the fleet to approach carefully. As they got closer, the sensors revealed more details. The asteroid was almost 50 kilometers across. The metal structures inside were enormous, and there were energy signatures, faint but definitely there. Something inside was still running after what must have been thousands of years. They found an entrance, hidden beneath a layer of ice. It took Nathan and his team 3 days to cut through and get the ancient airlock working again. When the doors finally opened, Daniel led the first team inside personally. He had to see what his father had sent him to find. What they found took his breath away. Ships. Hundreds of warships. Each one larger and more powerful looking than anything the Galactic Council had ever built. They were covered in frost, but they were perfectly preserved, their hulls gleaming under the lights of the human flashlights. The designs were strange and beautiful. All smooth curves and sharp angles that seemed to flow like water frozen in motion. Dr. Amy Lynn was the ship's historian, and she walked through the vast chamber with tears in her eyes. She had spent her whole life studying human history. She had written books about the early space age, about the first colonies, about humanity's integration into galactic society. And now she was looking at something that rewrote everything she thought she knew. The chamber went on for kilometers. They found not just warships, but cargo vessels and medical ships, and what looked like mobile space stations. And in the deepest part of the asteroid, they found the sleepers. Millions of cryogenic pods lined the walls of a cavern, so large that its ceiling disappeared into darkness. Each pod contained a human being, frozen in perfect preservation. Men and women of all ages, all wearing uniforms that no one recognized. All sleeping a sleep that had lasted for 10,000 years. Amy found the records in a computer system that was still functioning after all this time. The language was old, a form of English that had not been spoken in millennia. But she managed to translate it, with help from the ship's computers. The truth was more incredible than any of them had imagined. Humans had not evolved on Earth. They had returned to it. 10,000 years ago, humanity had ruled a vast empire that spanned the entire galaxy. They had been the dominant species, the most advanced civilization in existence. The races that now sat on the Galactic Council had been their enemies, defeated in wars that had lasted centuries. But humanity had grown tired of war and conquest. They had looked at what they had become, and they had not liked it. So they made a choice. They hid their fleet and their warriors in this secret place. They wiped their own memories and started over on a small blue planet, hoping to build a better civilization this time. A peaceful one. Lavra read the records over Amy's shoulder. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. She said these people had put themselves to sleep because they wanted to be forgotten. They wanted humanity to have a fresh start without the burden of their violent past. Kevin stepped forward and looked at the sleeping faces in the nearest pods. He asked if they could wake them. He asked if these ancient warriors could help them fight back against the Council. Nathan ran his calculations on the pod systems. Everything was still working. The sleepers could be revived. But he warned Daniel that these were not ordinary humans. The records showed that they had been genetically enhanced for combat. Faster reflexes, stronger bodies, sharper minds. They were weapons in human form. Daniel thought about it for a long time. He thought about Earth burning. He thought about the children who had died without understanding why. He thought about the Council toasting their successful genocide while human survivors hid in the darkness like frightened animals. These ancient humans had chosen peace once. They had given up their power and their empire because they believed in something better. And the galaxy had repaid that choice with betrayal and murder. Daniel gave the order. Wake them. Wake them all. The machines began to hum. Ice cracked and fell away from the pods. And in the cold darkness of the Oort cloud, the sleeping giants of humanity began to open their eyes. The galaxy had forgotten what humans could truly be. It was time to remind them. The first ancient human to wake was a woman named Beth Harding. She was tall and strong with gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that seemed to look right through everything they saw. When her cryogenic pod opened, she did not gasp or stumble like someone waking from a long sleep. She simply opened her eyes, looked around the chamber, and stepped out as if she had only been resting for a few minutes. Daniel approached her carefully. He did not know what to expect from someone who had been asleep for 10,000 years. He introduced himself and explained that he was the commander of the surviving human fleet. Beth looked at him for a long moment without speaking. Then she asked a single question. How long? Daniel told her the truth. 10,000 years had passed since she went to sleep. The galaxy had changed completely, and humanity had been nearly destroyed. Beth closed her eyes. Daniel expected her to be shocked or confused or angry. Instead, when she opened her eyes again, there was only a calm acceptance. She had known this moment might come. She had known that the sleep might end in darkness. She asked Daniel to show her what had happened. He took her to a viewing room and played the recordings of Earth's destruction. She watched without expression as the Valorian warships bombed city after city. She watched as the council members voted for human extinction. She watched as billions of people died in fire and chaos. When the recordings ended, Beth stood in silence for several minutes. Then she turned to Daniel and spoke in a voice that was quiet but filled with cold fury. She knew these species. The Valorians, the Cathari, the Dominion of Sirith. 10,000 years ago, her people had defeated them all. They had crushed their fleets and occupied their worlds and forced them to surrender. And then they had shown mercy. They had let them rebuild. They had given them a second chance. Kevin had followed them to the viewing room. He asked Beth why her people had chosen to sleep instead of ruling the galaxy forever. Beth turned to look at him with those ancient eyes. She said that power corrupts. They had become something terrible during the wars. They had done things that made them ashamed to be human. When the wars ended, they looked at themselves and saw monsters. So they chose to start over. They believed that a humanity without the memory of conquest would be a better humanity. Laura asked if Beth regretted that choice now. 10,000 years of peace had ended in genocide. Beth was quiet for a moment. Then she said she did not regret trying to be better, but she did regret being naive. The galaxy did not reward kindness. The galaxy remembered only strength. Over the following days, more ancient humans woke from their long sleep. They moved with a precision and grace that made the modern humans look clumsy in comparison. Their bodies were different, enhanced by genetic engineering from an age when humanity had no limits on what they could do to themselves. Admiral Greg Lawson was Beth's second in command. He was a massive man with scars on his face and hands that had clearly seen many battles. He took charge of assessing the ancient fleet and found that everything was still functional. The ships had been built to last forever, and they had. Greg looked at the modern human vessels with something like pity. He told Nathan that their technology was primitive but clever. The modern humans had reinvented many things that the ancients had known, but they had taken different paths. He said they could combine the old and the new to create something even more powerful. The ancient soldiers began training the modern humans. It was not easy. The survivors had been colonists and miners and scientists. They were not warriors, but they learned because they had no other choice. Beth personally oversaw Daniel's training. She pushed him harder than anyone else because she saw something in him. She saw a leader who could bridge the gap between the ancient warriors and the modern survivors. During one training session, Beth told Daniel that his people had become soft during their time of peace. They had forgotten how to fight. They had forgotten that the universe was full of species who would kill them without hesitation. Daniel was breathing hard from the exercises. He told Beth that they had not forgotten. They had chosen peace because they believed it was better than war. They had trusted the other species to do the same. Beth smiled then, a cold and knowing smile. She said trust was a luxury that only the strong could afford. The weak who trusted were simply prey waiting to be eaten. The modern humans worked alongside the ancient ones for months. They repaired ships and manufactured weapons and trained until their bodies ached. The scattered survivors from other colonies arrived one by one, guided by secret signals that Daniel had sent across the galaxy. Amy Lynn spent her time learning the history of the ancient humans. She discovered that they had founded the original Galactic Council long before they chose to sleep. The council had been their creation, meant to maintain peace after the wars ended. The species that now ruled the galaxy had inherited a system built by humans and then used it to destroy humanity. Kevin became one of the best students among the modern humans. His grief had transformed into a cold determination that the ancient warriors recognized and respected. Beth assigned him to lead one of the new combat units being formed from survivors. Laura took command of a frigate after proving herself in simulation after simulation. The ancient officers were impressed by her tactical thinking. They said she had the instincts of a true warrior, even though she had never fought a real battle. When the preparations were finally complete, Beth gathered everyone in the main hangar of the ancient base. Thousands of humans stood before her, both ancient and modern. The fleet behind her stretched into the darkness, hundreds of warships ready to fly again. Beth spoke simply. She said the galaxy had tried to destroy humanity twice. Once 10,000 years ago, and once now. The first time, humans had shown mercy. This time would be different. This time, the galaxy would learn that some mistakes could never be forgiven. Daniel stood beside her and looked at the faces of his people. They were tired and scarred and angry, but they were also ready. The hunters had become the hunted for long enough that it was time for humanity to strike back. For 3 years, the Galactic Council celebrated their victory over humanity. They held festivals and parades. They gave medals to the admirals who had led the attacks. They renamed human colonies after their own heroes and stripped the planets of every resource they could find. High Counselor Varix of the Kethari became the most powerful being in the galaxy. He gave speeches about how humanity had been a disease that threatened all civilized species. He said the council had done what was necessary to protect the future. He said the human problem had been solved forever. He was wrong. The first sign that something was wrong came from the Valorian border worlds. 3 military outposts went silent on the same night. The Valorians sent ships to investigate, and those ships never returned. Then 2 more outposts went dark. Then a major colony stopped responding to communications. The council assumed it was pirates or a technical failure. They sent a battle fleet of 50 warships to restore order. The fleet arrived at the Valorian colony world and found it intact. The people were alive, but they were terrified. They said ships had come from nowhere. Ships unlike anything they had ever seen. Ships that moved too fast and hit too hard and disappeared before anyone could fight back. The battle fleet commander demanded more information, but before anyone could answer, the ancient human vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel all around them. The Valorian commander had 3 seconds to feel fear before his flagship exploded. A single ship survived the battle. It was allowed to escape on purpose so it could carry a message back to the council. The message was broadcast on all frequencies in perfect Valorian language. It said that humanity had returned. It said that humanity remembered, and it said that humanity would not forgive. High Counselor Varix did not believe the reports at first. Humanity was extinct. He had watched Earth burn with his own eyes. He had personally signed the orders to hunt down survivors. There was no way humans could have a fleet powerful enough to destroy 50 warships in minutes. Then the attacks spread. The Gethari lost their largest shipyard in a single night. The Dominion of Sirith watched helplessly as their entire border defense network was systematically dismantled. The Valorians lost colony after colony, not to destruction but to liberation. The human ships would arrive, destroy every military vessel, and then leave the civilian population unharmed. Admiral Beth Harding commanded the campaign from the bridge of the ancient flagship Judgment. She had studied the modern galaxy during the months of preparation. She knew exactly where the Council was weak and exactly how to exploit those weaknesses. Daniel served as her advisor on modern politics and technology. He stood beside her during every battle, watching the woman who had slept for 10,000 years wage war with a precision that was almost beautiful. Beth did not waste ships or lives. Every attack was calculated for maximum impact with minimum losses. She struck supply lines and communication hubs and weapons factories. She avoided civilian targets completely. The ancient humans had rules about war, and those rules did not allow the murder of innocents. Lavra led a strike force of 12 ships against the Kethari homeworld's orbital defenses. Her crew was a mix of ancient and modern humans working together as if they had trained side by side for years. They destroyed every military station around the planet in less than an hour. Kevin commanded a ground assault unit that landed on occupied human colonies to drive out the Council forces. The colonists who had been living under alien rule for 3 years wept when they saw human soldiers again. They had given up hope. They had believed they were the last of their kind. Greg Lawson personally led the assault on the Dominion of Sireth's main fleet. It was the largest naval engagement of the war. 300 Council ships against 100 ancient human vessels. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Council fleet no longer existed. The elder races had never faced an enemy like this. Their weapons could not penetrate ancient human shields. Their ships could not match ancient human speed. Their tactics could not predict ancient human movements. They had spent 10,000 years believing they were the masters of the galaxy, and now they were learning how wrong they had been. High Counselor Varix called emergency sessions of the Council. He demanded that all species contribute their entire military forces to stop the human advance. He screamed about the danger of extinction. He begged for unity against the common enemy, but unity was hard to find when everyone was losing. The Valorians blamed the Kethari for starting the war against humanity in the first place. The Dominion blamed the Council for underestimating the humans. The minor species who had been forced to participate in the genocide began to surrender to the humans, rather than face them in battle. Varix tried to send diplomats to negotiate peace. Beth refused to receive them. She sent them back with a simple message. The Council had not negotiated before burning Earth. The Council had not offered peace before killing billions of innocent humans. The Council would receive the same mercy it had given. The war lasted 8 months. 8 months of systematic destruction as the ancient fleet took apart everything the Council had built. Military installations were reduced to rubble. Weapons factories were turned to ash. Every warship that could threaten humanity was hunted down and destroyed. The ancient humans did not kill civilians. They did not bomb cities or poison worlds. They were not the monsters that the Council had tried to make humanity seem, but they were thorough. When they finished, the Council species had nothing left to fight with. High Counselor Varix was captured trying to flee the capital on a private ship. His guards were killed in seconds, and he was dragged before Beth Harding in chains. He fell to his knees and begged for mercy. He offered territory and resources and anything else she wanted. Beth looked down at him with cold eyes. She said humanity had wanted peace. They had given up everything they built because they believed in a better galaxy. They had trusted the Council to honor that belief. Varix whimpered that he was sorry. He said he had only done what he thought was necessary for his people. Beth leaned close to him. She said his people would live. She was not going to commit genocide like he had. But his people would remember this day for every generation to come. They would remember what happened when they betrayed humanity. The war was over. Humanity had won, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Galactic Council surrendered unconditionally on a cold morning in the capital of the Keth-Ari homeworld. The representatives of every species that had participated in the genocide against humanity stood in a great hall with their heads bowed. They had no choice. Their fleets were gone. Their weapons were destroyed. Their pride was broken. Beth Harding stood before them in the uniform she had worn 10,000 years ago. Daniel stood beside her along with Lara and Kevin and the other leaders of the new human forces. Behind them, through the great windows, the ancient fleet hung in orbit. A reminder of what humanity could do when pushed too far. Beth did not gloat. She did not make speeches about revenge or justice. She simply told the Council that their organization was dissolved. The treaties that had allowed them to act together were void. The military alliances that had given them power were forbidden. Each species would return to their own borders and stay there. High Counselor Varix had been stripped of his title and his power. He sat in a cell waiting to face a tribunal for his crimes. The other leaders who had voted for human extinction would face the same fate. Not death. The ancient humans did not believe in execution, but they would spend the rest of their lives in prison, remembering what they had done. Some of the younger alien diplomats asked what would happen next. Would humanity rule the galaxy now? Would they become the new council and control everything? Beth shook her head. She explained that humanity had tried that before. They had ruled the galaxy 10,000 years ago, and it had corrupted them. It had turned them into something they did not want to be. They would not make that mistake again. Daniel stepped forward to explain what humanity wanted. They wanted a home. They wanted safety. They wanted to rebuild what had been taken from them. They did not want an empire. The aliens did not understand. They had always believed that power was the only thing that mattered. They could not imagine having the strength to rule everything and choosing not to use it. After the surrender ceremony, the ancient humans began the long process of deciding their own futures. Many of them were tired. They had been warriors for so long that they had forgotten how to be anything else. The thought of sleeping again, of letting the younger generation take over, was appealing to them. Beth gathered the ancient soldiers in the main hangar of the Judgment one last time. She told them they had a choice. They could stay awake and help rebuild human civilization, or they could return to sleep and let the modern humans carry on without them. Most chose to sleep. They had done their duty. They had protected humanity when humanity needed them. Now they wanted to rest and let the new generation have their chance. They filed back into their cryogenic pods one by one, closing their eyes on a galaxy they had saved twice. Beth was one of the last to enter her pod. Before she did, she pulled Daniel aside for a private conversation. She told him that he had proven himself during the war. He was a good leader. More importantly, he was a good man. The modern humans had not lost the best parts of themselves during their centuries of peace. They had kept their kindness and their hope alive. Daniel asked Beth if she thought they could do it. Could they rebuild without becoming the conquerors their ancestors had been? Beth smiled. She said she did not know, but she believed in him. She believed in all of them. That was why she could sleep peacefully. She gave him one final piece of advice. She told him to remember what humanity was capable of, both the good and the bad, to build a civilization that honored the good while never forgetting the lessons of the bad, and to always be ready, because the galaxy was full of dangers and peace was never permanent. Then she entered her pod and closed her eyes. The ice began to form around her, and she slept once more. Not all the ancient humans chose to sleep. A few thousand decided to stay awake and help the modern humans build their new society. Greg Lawson was one of them. He said he was too old to fight anymore, but he still had things to teach. Nothing worked with the ancient engineers to combine old and new technology in ways that neither could have imagined alone. The survivors were given a new homeworld. It was a garden planet in a system that the ancients had kept secret for 10,000 years. Green forests and blue oceans and skies that reminded everyone of the Earth they had lost. They named it New Hope because that was what it represented. Daniel became the first leader of the new human confederacy. It was not an empire, and it was not a military dictatorship. It was a democracy where every human had a voice. They would not repeat the mistakes of the past. Lavra Mitchell took command of the defense forces. She trained a new generation of soldiers who understood both war and peace. They hoped they would never have to fight again, but they were ready if they did. Kevin Brooks retired from military service and became a teacher. He taught children about Earth and about the ancestors who had slept in the darkness to protect them. He taught them that strength and kindness could exist together. He never forgot his family who died on Earth, but he learned to live with the pain. Years passed. The scars of the war slowly healed. The alien species kept to their borders and did not threaten humanity again. Some of them eventually sent ambassadors to New Hope, seeking to establish new relationships built on honesty instead of deception. One day, a young Valorian diplomat visited the human capital. He was born after the war and had grown up hearing stories about the terrible humans who had destroyed his people's fleet. He was curious and a little afraid. Daniel met with him personally. The diplomat asked a question that had bothered him for years. He asked why humanity had not destroyed the Valorians completely. They had the power. They had the right after what the Valorians had done. Why had they shown mercy? Daniel looked out the window at the city below. Children were playing in the streets. Families were having picnics in the parks. Life was continuing as it always did, regardless of the darkness that had come before. He told the diplomat that revenge would have been easy. Genocide would have been simple. But humanity had learned a long time ago that those paths led nowhere good. They had tried conquest once, and it had almost destroyed their souls. The diplomat nodded slowly, beginning to understand. Daniel turned to face him directly. He said humanity would always remember what the council had done. They would never forget the billions who died. But they refused to let that memory turn them into monsters. Then his expression hardened. He told the diplomat to remember something else too. Humanity had shown mercy twice now. There would not be a third time. If anyone ever threatened human lives again, the fleet waiting in the darkness would wake once more. And next time, there would be no mercy left to give. The diplomat understood. He returned to his people with stories of humans who were kind and generous and absolutely terrifying. And in the deep spaces between the stars, the ancient fleet waited, silent, patient, ready. Humanity had struck back. The galaxy would never forget.